Welcome to Behind the Doc Lens. I'm your host, Olga Medvedev-Young. Today's guest is Chico Colvard. He is a documentary filmmaker, lecturer, and founding film series curator at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. His film, Family Affair, is an award-winning documentary which premiered at Sundance and has been broadcast on Oprah Winfrey's network, OWN, among other cable channels all around the world. He is here to share his intensely personal examination of his own troubled family's history. This is Behind the Doc Lens.
There's nothing about that day that was real. I do remember, but I was downstairs in the family room watching Rifleman.
The Rifleman!
It was make-believe. I don't remember pulling the trigger, but I remember the sound, It was just really deafening. It wasn't a conscious effort on my part. I certainly didn't deliberately shoot my sister.
I walked down that hospital hall and heard Paula screaming at the top of her lungs. Screaming.
Next thing I remember, Mama, Angie, and Chicky are all in the room visiting me. And I looked over at Angie and I'm begging her, please tell Mama. Please tell her. Because I'm thinking I'm dying, you know what I'm saying? I'm thinking I'm dying. I don't want to go to my death knowing that this is still going on.
Mama looked at me like, Chicky, do you know? And I was like, And then Angie answered up real quick, Mama, it's true.
I realized that she may never move again, and I can make the difference. And so that's the first time I told Mom. When I told her, she was hysterical.
Some cars pull up, and then next thing I know, there was a knock at the door.
The police surrounded the house. Of course, Daddy acted like he didn't know what was happening, because he was shocked.
But one said, no, you're not even going out there. Because your records reflect that you're a dangerous man.
I think he got her into a cult. He brainwashed her. That's what I think happened to Mama.
When we all got separated, we lost our lifelines. As dysfunctional as it was, we needed each other.
But you all have no idea what was going on in that house. You have no idea.
Joining me today is Chico Colvard. Chico, thank you so much for being with us. Welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I have to say that this documentary was probably one of the heaviest pieces I've ever watched in my life. What inspired you to share this story?
It's not something that's easy to talk about, although ironically, I spent a lot of time now talking about it. I spent a lot of years actually trying to distance myself from this part of my past. Moving far away from the South where a lot of these incidents occurred, building up a lot of degrees and letters and things after my name, but it was always haunting me. So I found myself compelled to sort of confront the past in order to be free from it, quite
What
frankly.
gave you the courage?
I don't know. Courage is a strange word to use here. It's really fear.
Fear.
Fear was a major motivator here. Fear of being burdened by this part of my past for the rest of my life. Fear of being solely defined by this part of my past. The courage for me came from people like my sisters who allowed me to tell their story, our story. People like various film festival programmers or broadcasters who've had the courage to show this film, to share this story with their audiences.
There is quite a bit of controversy involved to this story, for sure. But I have to ask, when I first started watching the film, it was almost a little bit unclear where it was going. Mm-hmm. There were moments where I was like, ooh, this is this is definitely going to be something very intense. Did you want the setup to be on the longer side to kind of build suspense for the audience?
Well, there are a couple of things that are happening there. Because the subject matter that's at the core, at the center of the film is so sensitive and volatile, I felt that I needed to be very careful to not sensationalize the trauma, and to also not sort of turn it into cinematic therapy at the expense of the audience, sort of a captive audience. And I also had to sort of operate on the assumption that I wanted to reach people who, not only people who had experienced similar like situations to my sisters, but also people who had not. So I had to focus a lot on dramatic narrative devices. So how do you sort of build and shape a narrative? When do you have a reveal and a crescendo and humor and those sort of elements that are very commonplace and universal and would create these points of access for people who hadn't experienced what my family's experienced.
Yeah. What kind of emotion did you want to grasp from the viewer when telling, each of these stories individually?
I wanted to capture that they each are at sort of different stages of sort of managing their trauma, which includes varying stages of forgiveness or difficulty to forgive. And I also wanted to work really hard to not reduce them to the worst thing that ever happened to them. And so for me, it was really important to create these little like vignettes or mosaics around, them as just normal people trying to get through the day, shopping and washing dishes, just like the rest of us.
They're not beaten down and broken by any means. And, that was refreshing. And I think you did a very good job of showing that. You chose to talk about your mother almost last. And it was interesting because I didn't realize that your mother would even come into play at all. Talk about how hard it was for you to reach out to her to try to get her to open up about this.
It actually wasn't at all, to my surprise. I thought it would be, my sisters thought it would be, and so I wanted to sort of recreate my experience. I wanted to share that experience with the audience, sort of my journey to her and all of my angst and anticipating that she wouldn't be as open as she was after being absent at that stage for 18 years. It's really sort of funny, this is a bit of sort of anecdotal sort of thing behind the scenes, but so the guy in the car with me, Marcus, he's not a camera guy by any stretch of the imagination. He's a friend, and I brought him along because I felt safe with him. And I went into the situation cold. I didn't call her in advance because I thought if I did, she would
shut down,
make sure that she was not available. So I get there, and it's in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, out in the middle of, as far as I'm concerned, sort of nowhere. It was, there was a real blizzard going down, and I say to him, I say, listen, if I go up to the door, knock on the door, she calls the cops, and the cops come, and arrest me or something, save the footage. Don't jump out of the car and be like, hey, that's my friend. And I was thinking, and like if I get shot, if she opens the door, this is what I'm imagining are like the outcomes. Like cops arrest me, I get shot, or my mom, best case scenario, opens the door and slams it in my face. That's all I was hoping to get. But I knew for myself, and also at that point, sort of thinking more and more about the audience, is that I needed to confront that. I needed to confront that part of my past, even if it meant her slamming the door in my face. And he says to me, all right, yeah, man, I can do all that, but what do I do if she opens the door and invites you in? And I was like, that's not going to happen.
Wow.
And of course she does. And
Incredible.
She was so forthcoming.
She was. She seemed very happy to see you, actually.
Right.
And she opened up. I mean, I guess it didn't take much convincing. Do you sympathize with your mother? Do you see her side of the story?
I didn't prior to sort of going there. But afterwards, when she was, the way that she sort of explained it in terms of feeling betrayed betrayed by my sisters, having, given up so much, losing the home, and all these people back then, 1978, 79, who were telling her to just stick it out, stay with this man because he can pay a mortgage because of health care, for these.
And times were different back then.
Times were very different. There was no Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
There were no women's shelters, none of that. And she turned him in and then lost everything. And then to have her daughters as adults willfully go back to this man.
Yeah.
As an adult, I understood that. The process of filming this over the course of 8 years and then, now sort of being on the road with it for more than 2 years, it certainly has a kind of cathartic effect and sort of liberating. And so for me, it was not so much important to get what once upon a time I thought was the right answer. It was really more important to ask the question so that I could, we started this interview so that I could be free, sort of liberated from being burdened or solely defined by this part of my past. And go off and make musicals and whatever else I want to do now.
Do you feel more liberated?
Oh, absolutely.
So you basically accomplished what you set out to do, essentially, in
I
terms
think so,
of
yeah.
From your own side.
I think so.
For
It's
yourself.
pretty terrifying. And you might check in with me like in 10 years and I'll be a mess, but for now I feel okay, yeah.
As I was watching this, I was filled with a lot of different emotions. What emotion do you want to evoke from your viewers, specifically towards your father?
The film, in my experience, what it's done primarily is give people permission to talk about their own experiences of trauma and betrayal. And that's been very gratifying for me.
Were you scared to get the criticism that perhaps you're airing your dirty laundry or you're putting your family's, most intimate details out there?
I was using the camera as a means to sort of understand and process this part of my past. And once it started to sort of, you start applying for grants and things start coming through and you start becoming a little bit more public about this film that you're making, and building sort of an army of credits, I would check in with my sisters and I would say, so this is the stage that it's at. I don't know. What if this thing did become a film? Are you okay with this? They were so great. They were so supportive at every stage.
I'm glad that there are such avenues as OWN, Oprah's show, and Sundance. How did you go about getting that out there, or did they come to you?
I've never actually told the story on air, so this is an exclusive.
This is an exclusive. But at the same time, this is behind the doc lens, so we want to know how these things happen.
Right. At this point, I had some names that were attached to the film, like Liz Garbus and Stanley Nelson and Sam Pollard and folks like that. And one of the people that I was put in touch with is Abigail Disney, the daughter or granddaughter of Disney and all that. And she was becoming sort of interested in investing in social justice documentaries. And one of these people had brought my film to her attention. And she told me that I should get in touch with a woman named Annie Roney at Roney Films International, so anticipating international sales. And Annie Roney had handled her film, Pray the Devil Back to Hell. And I talked to Annie right before she was going off to MIPCOM. She goes to France, comes back, calls me and says, this will be a good match for what I want to do, but you have to sign a non-disclosure. So that's when she reveals to me that Oprah's getting ready to retire. She's going to start this network, Oprah Winfrey Network, and that she's going to be the curator of documentaries for Oprah, and that this might be a good film for them to launch.
It's pretty incredible.
The Doc Club with. So I was sort of making a commitment to something that didn't exist, which was pretty scary. And there were offers on the table from proven broadcasters. But I thought it was the right fit. I really trusted Annie. And one of the people that was really instrumental in making this happen actually had no connection to OWN or Annie, and it was Simon Kilmurray actually at POV, who had made me the best offer they can make. And I thought, well, I felt like I was going to have to turn it down. And I called him and I said, I want to sort of, it's the 11th hour, I'm going to Sundance. There are a lot of options out there, and I want to explore them all. He made it happen by saying, Chico, I totally understand where you're at.
Yeah.
I love your film, and let me make this offer to you. You go to Sundance. If whatever it is that you're looking for happens, I totally support you. And if it doesn't, I want you to know this offer still stands.
Wow.
That
incredible.
was huge.
Incredible.
It was huge.
Have you heard about what kind of response people have been having towards this film?
There's a response when you're doing things like this, or when you're at a film festival. You know, live engagement with the audience is really powerful and intense. I oftentimes leave feeling a little bit guilty. It's one thing for me to, you know, I've neatly sort of defined and packaged this story. Very rare that people ask me questions about anything that happens off screen of what I've presented, which keeps me pretty safe. But here are people who, for the very first time, are standing up in front of, you know, I've had years of sitting with editors and really thinking through these issues and finally sort of crafting this narrative and speaking. And people standing up in front of hundreds of people and sharing their stories, or even more powerfully, I think also, or equally as powerful, are people standing up and saying, this didn't happen to me, but I identify with the issues of betrayal. Seeing people time and time again, this film giving them permission to talk about their own issues is very, very powerful. I have to say, like in the other sort of venue where it, after OWN broadcast, I agreed, you know, and I'll never do this again, but I agreed to, you know, you have these big PR firms and everything, and they're like, we're going to do this, and we're going to, you know, would you be open to tweeting live during the, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll tweet live, whatever.
How did that turn out?
That was really hard because, at least, you know, in the live venues, there's usually, they have some kind of counselor or therapist or social services or something there to provide some assistance for those people that are divulging this very sensitive information. And here I was just getting like 16-year-old girls from Alabama, you know, or grandmothers from Canada, and I didn't know what to do in however many characters you're limited to. You know?
Get help! Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Get help!
And there was also, you know, like people, you can't filter that. You can't, you know, a festival like Silver Docs, there's a certain kind of person that shows up. But in the tweet world, you know, you get just real knuckleheads just saying.
Well, it seems that for every knucklehead, you've touched so many more lives, and you know, this really is a compelling story. And I'm glad that it was a good avenue for you to work out a lot of your issues. And thank you so much for sharing it with all of us. And
thanks for having me.
We wish you all the best of luck. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining us on Behind the Doc Lens. Till next time, I'm your host, Olga Medvedev-Young.